Miguel Cobo, good afternoon. Welcome on VH Berries.
Thank you very much.
When I took a deeper look on design thinking, I learned that culture eats process for lunch.
Interesting. Okay, that one I didn't know. When we decided to look for a topic, I found interesting to maybe share with you my experience with design thinking, mainly because after I was trained, let's say, at the design school at Stanford in California, I always applied this approach, not only for technological projects, but also sometimes even to improve the way of working within organizations. And I think that what is interesting about design thinking, it's not about technology. It's an approach. It's a human-centered approach. And it is first empathy. It's empathy and listening. So what is funny, it is that you spend, when you have this kind of training, you spend one full day where they teach you how to learn to listen. And I was a little bit surprised in the beginning. I say, okay, we have 4 days to learn this approach. And the first step is listening. And after a while, you understand the importance of it, right? Because this helps to ask the right question. So maybe this interview will give you some hints later on how to interview other people. But it is about not having any point of view. So the less you know about a topic, the better, because it helps basically for you to not being influenced by what you think, on the contrary. And this is why I think this approach is extremely powerful. One of the things, as I said that the approach is human-centered, because the first step is empathy, listening. And then the interesting part is that you need to meet and interview multiple people. When you meet, let's say, around 10 to 20 people about the same topic, you start to get a point of view. And the interesting thing is that the interview, you're not doing it alone. So you have basically someone else, which consists on watching, basically. So when you ask me a question, you are very focused on the question. So you're listening, but you're not watching me. And it's important that there's another person who watch the person, like, let's say, in this case, me, how I react to some of your questions. If there is a question that I might consider not relevant, I might answer you very relaxed. But on the other hand, you might see my mimic, but not when you interview, right? And that is interesting and that is important. So to tell you more, so as I said, it's first to listen, then you interview many people, then you have basically a point of view. And then what you do is that you sit down with others, and then you start to try to understand the answers that they gave you. And then you start to identify what is the problematic, because design thinking is an approach to try to resolve problems, right? Those problems could be human, can be technological, could be processes, could be whatever you want. And then after 20 interviews, you start to notice that all the interviewers are telling you the same thing about one specific point of view, right? And I'll come back as an example. And then you start to brainstorm. And then at the end, you come with a proof of concept. The proof of concept could be a sheet of paper that you show to someone. And because you show, you get feedback. And what's happening is you don't have to, again, you show, you don't tell, you don't try to influence. And then because you didn't spend too much time on the prototype, you can scrap it if it was wrong, and you come back with something different. And with some iteration, then you come with a real prototype, and then you can build on top of that.
Absolutely, because in addition to have empathy, you also have to develop a sense of observation
Absolutely.
and curiosity.
Yes.
And when I first took a look at your work on the internet, for example, I was saying to myself, this is something very complex, but in definitive, you are using a pair of scissors every day.
Pairs of scissors, paper, scotch tape, name it, right? And I can give you multiple examples, and then you can even do some kind of you can tell a story to explain what is your prototype, right? So it doesn't need to be a technology. So I'm going to give you an example. So when we were in Stanford, we met the CEO of a company of hotels, which was the Hyatt. And what the problematic they asked, so you will see it was nothing technological. They said, I would like that our customers, whenever they live, basically the experience in the hotel, they have the same similar experience outside of the hotel. Thank you very much. Now go and provide me some ideas. So the team that I was working with was there was a general of the Malaysian army, there was a social worker, there was a VP engineering, there was another engineer, and it was me. And so different point of view. And the general told us that when he arrived to California, he was a little bit lost, and he would have loved to have someone to tell him, you give him indication, etc. Right? And we thought about that. We went. They dropped us downtown San Francisco, and we start to interview people. And just with the interview, we had some ideas about the questions. We had a nice lady who told us that for her, she was with her husband. Her husband had a congress, and her husband selected an hotel because it was not too far from the congress, and it was not too far from the shops. But for him, what he was worried was that she didn't have to go that far from the hotel. So we start to understand that people could be afraid, right, when they go to a different city. And then we did some other interviews, etc. And we came at the end with a proposal, which was to say, okay, so we're going to propose that some shops are trained by the hotel to learn the culture of the hotel. There will be a badge saying Hyatt hospitality, and tourists that will go outside the hotel, when they go around to shop, when they will see the logo, they will know that they are a little bit like home if there is any problem. And they can enter to those shop. The owners can basically, they know that they are from the hotel because they will ask them the badge, and they will take care of them. And by that, we try to address basically the problematic. And so the prototype was to do a show where we had someone who was lost, etc. And we did it in a very theatrical way, but it was funny, and that was the prototype. And there was no technology, right? So that's one of the example, but I have multiple examples with different industries that I can tell.
Absolutely, Miguel, because you just mentioned, for example, the franchise of the hotel that give more trust and confidence to the new customers. But you also did something very similar when you were in America, for example, with a patient with a sort of webcam on his head.
Yes, that's true.
So he can experience the emergency room.
Exactly. So so this was because we were so we had the training, of course, with Stanford, but we were also working with a company that is, I would say, the reference for design thinking, because the founder of that company, Tim Brown, found the company IDEO. And IDEO is a company for design thinking, right? To change completely the world in the approach to improve things. And as you know, when you go to the hospital and you're in the emergency rooms or waiting for the doctor, something like that, it's a very tough experience. So as I mentioned to you, one of the researcher put a webcam on top of his head just to see for 48 hours what was the experience, right? And let's say 5 hours or 6 was the camera was looking at the roof. So they said, is there anything we can do, make the roof a little bit much more friendlier or something like that? So that was one of the things they were exploring. But yes, so as I say, it is first to understand the problematic that you go through, and then you can basically start to look for different ideas, from those who are extreme to very simple and concrete. But because you don't have a point of view, your mind does not restrict you to your to what you believe. Let's put it this way.
And what I find very inspiring and very interesting about your work, Miguel, is that since the 80s, and yes, the 80s, you had the same competence, but the thing that you did is to apply them in different companies. So
that's correct.
In CBC,
that's correct.
And now for the city of Montreal.
So I didn't have yet the chance to experiment it yet at the city of Montreal. However, I can tell you what we did at Ericsson and also at the railway company. So in the case of Ericsson, we did an innovation called the Virtual Enterprise Gateway. And the idea was that we had a team of young engineers that went to meet startups. And they interviewed 20 CEOs of small startups. And they discovered that by interviewing, they were thinking that they will do something very technical. But the finding was that all the CEOs were saying, I do not want to be the director of the IT department and fix computer problems. So we said, so what about if we would build a solution to basically avoid that part? And that's where we built the Virtual Enterprise Gateway. And it was a way, very simple way, basically to provide most of the IT service to new employees, and where the CEO didn't have to do anything. So that's an example. I can give you another example in the railway industry. What we did, we wanted, in fact, to increase the productivity in the mechanical shops, and we realized by providing a tablet, like a Google tablet or an iPad, something like that, to supervisors, the fact that the supervisor were closer to their team was helping basically the mechanical team to fix much more faster the locomotive, for instance, and the productivity increase in a very significant way. So again, and it was more based on observation. And what we realized that the problematic once was, of course, to have the supervisor closer to the employee. But the other thing we realized, because you know that in the mechanical shops, they have different shifts of 8 hours. So we realized that we need to find a solution to have the tablet always charged and operational. So the technical part was more to fix the problem of the charging. Let's put it this way.
But between you and me, Miguel, you have to admit that failure is a big part of your job, because
Absolutely.
It's by repeating some action that you will succeed sooner.
In fact, I always say to the people I work with that experience is based on an accumulation of failures, basically. And one of the example that a top manager in Silicon Valley said, they said, we want people to fail because they will learn. So as long as you fail and learn, it's fine. But if you do twice the problem, that means that you didn't understand anything, and then there is a problem, right? But no, exactly. So it's a sort of a change on the mentality, because the classical conservative way is that people are afraid to make mistakes. But no, it is in fact the only way that you learn.
If I understood correctly, you are directing a team of around 20 manager and people.
20 project managers. Absolutely.
So in a day, you have so much domain to manage. So how do you deal with all this adversity?
It's a good question. at the end of every day, I'm asking how did I do, because I switch from one problematic to another. But I'm much more exposed to the challenges on the project management and the technology. But I'm still involved sometimes on some of the discussion. It's a little bit like speaking multiple languages. You swap naturally. You don't even feel it. Basically, I think it's time is the problem.
Miguel, I would love to retrace your journey from 2010 when you went on a one-way trip to California in the United States of America.
Yeah, this is something that we would have never thought that we would go to California. Our preference has always been to our affinities were more in Europe. But sometimes in life it is about opportunities, and we thought that this would be interesting. It was just when the crisis of the subprime were starting to happening, and we were offered to go to California. Our kids were always following the French system, so it was not a problem of adaptation. But what has been interesting is that we even have a training on the Californian and U.S. culture, even though we're Canadian. And in the beginning, we thought that this was a little bit too much. But there are effectively differences, right? Here in Canada, the state is very important. So we have free healthcare. We have a lot of services provided by the state. While in the United States, it's another mentality, right? Everyone believes that you have a chance to grow and to become rich. So they are not excited, at least that's our perception, by having too much government. Instead, what we notice, for instance, is that the community is very present. So just to give you a couple of examples, there was an incident due to a gas leakage in the south part of San Francisco, and it started and a lot of houses took fire, etc. Right? And what we were surprised was to see how the community, so everyone, were trying to collect money to help people. Right? Well, if it would have been in Canada, well, the government would have come, they would have helped the people, and then they would have give a little bit of money to help them. In this case, so you were going to the supermarket, for instance, and in the supermarket they say, would you like to donate specifically for this problematic, right? On the school side, for instance, our daughters had the opportunity to spend some time in Louisiana, for when Katrina, the hurricane, destroyed a lot of houses, there was program by the schools. So in this case was Le Lycée Français de San Francisco, who were offering students to go and do some community work and help to rebuild some houses. So you see, it's another mentality. So that was some of the difference. Of course, when it comes to healthcare, we have a different perspective, right? So yes, because it's private, you get luxury services, but if you have the bad luck not to have these insurances, then it could be extremely difficult for people. So it's the world of I would say extremes. The other thing that we discover is, and that is because when you live in the Silicon Valley, you meet a lot of amazing people, a lot of entrepreneurs, and we had the impression that most of the people in Silicon Valley were arrogant engineers, but not at all. They are curious. They like diversity. They want to know what are you doing, what you plan to do, but they are very focused, right? Very business focused. So yes, it was a very good experience. And then, of course, in the campus of universities, whether it is Berkeley or it is Stanford, we noticed that most of the teachers are also entrepreneurs. So they have their own startups, and sometimes students join them. Sometimes they facilitate the students to build startups. So this is amazing.
For instance, you just mentioned that there is a lot of energy in these spaces and a lot of competition also.
That is true. And thank you for reminding me that, because I forgot that. Silicon Valley, is the place where you have tremendous talent. And sometimes to attract them, I think this is where it's the biggest challenge. It's not about money in some cases. You have some people that were very successful in doing some startups. They earned a lot of money, but what they're looking for is more now the intellectual challenge, right? For instance, and I'm just giving an example, but it's a wrong example, but to say, well, we would like to send someone to Jupiter. That will interest someone and say, yeah, why not, right? And then you can attract those talents, right? So it's not the number of people working. It is basically more a small group of talented people that work together. And as I say, I can give you an amazing example. There is an important US company, I will not name it, but sometimes they invite even employees to leave the company if they have good ideas. And what they do is that they even, in some cases, they will invest in their startup. In some other cases, they will say, well, if it's true that you're going to build this thing, well, if you deliver this in, let's say, 18 months, we'll be your first customers. And moreover, we will tell you how much we'll pay for that and buy your company. So what's happening? So then the ones who found that idea, they are able to attract, because of the challenge, the right people, because they know exactly those people will work a lot for 18 months, but they have basically this perspective that they could earn a lot of money, and also the experience, right? So that's as an example, right? And another example that is interesting, I think it's worth mentioning, is that in some cases, other companies will be reluctant to lose their talent. So what they will propose is what they call intrapreneurship. So they say, well, if you have a good idea, what about if we allow you to become the VP of this new division that you will build? So tell us more. We will invest. You will be freed from your traditional work, and you can recruit who you want within the company, and you will work and build that. And if it's successful, then you will build your own division, and that's another way to allow people to grow.
And on the other hand, Miguel Cobo can take 5% of a successful startup if he believes in it.
Yes, that exactly. So again, there are multiple ideas. So sometimes what's happening is that you start with an idea, whether you are doing it internally in the company or outside, and that could become the idea for another opportunity. Sometimes you will be amazed about all these opportunities, and to link that with the design thinking is because you observe. You listen, you take notes, and you start to see basically the need for it, right? Because it's very important that if you build a company or if you build a new product, it's because you're addressing an important problem. And by resolving a problem, you have an idea basically about if people will really like that, it eases your marketing, and on top of that, it will allow you basically to have an idea about how worth is it. And that's the interesting part, right?
And when you were in California, were you interested in creating your own business, or maybe that you already did?
So, in fact, I had the chance in the last year and a half to drive the innovation group. So for me, it was not really, I never thought about doing it myself, because the company was really encouraging employees to do such an entrepreneurship. So what we had instead is that we came with a proposal of inviting employees around the world, because the company in which I was working was a big Swedish multinational. So we had people, we went to see the VPs of each site. So it was Sweden, it was Italy, it was Spain, it was also California. And we said, if you have a talented person, send it to us, send it to California. We'll take care of them. We'll train them. We will expose them to work on one or two topics. They will learn, and then we'll send it back to you, and they will be the ones who will create at your location the same culture. Because in fact, the idea was more to train the trainer, basically. So for us, it was much more important. And we said that the day where everyone will have that kind of mindset, then there's no need for us to stay. And then we can decide what we want to do.
This is fascinating because you've been there in the beginning of the last decade, and since then so many things have changed, because today the tech companies that you maybe implicitly mentioned have grown so much.
It's true. It's true. So I have friends at California, in California. We have seen the GAFA, so the Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon growing. Already when we were there, we saw Facebook doing its IPO. And the funniest thing is that if you wanted to buy some houses, sometimes some owners were saying, you can pay us with the Facebook shares. So it was unbelievable. But one thing that we learned also, and why they are successful, is because they have never hesitated in challenging basically the system. And this is this is the strength of Silicon Valley, is the mindset, right? I'm gonna give you also an interesting example. So I had the chance to go to meet the CMO of a Portuguese cellular company. I will not name it. And in the discussion, right, they wanted to know a little bit some products, and then another part of my presentation was about innovation. And they were very curious to know how can they create a Silicon Valley in Portugal. And they said, well, we were thinking to create the site somewhere between Faro, Lisboa, and Oporto. So somewhere in the middle. And I said, well, in fact, that would be a mistake. It's the most successful way to create some kind of Silicon Valley is to be close of universities, because that's where you have the students which are creative. It is also about infrastructure, having airports, so it's easy for people to come, and of course capital. But if you're lost somewhere in the middle of the countryside, you will maybe not be able to attract talent.
And Miguel, 4 years after, you went to the Hasso-Plattner Institute, which provides courses about
design thinking. Yes,
design thinking, and
so it's the D School, and the D School is I think it has been one of the best experience I ever had in my life. I can tell you, the design school is somewhere it's between. So it's in fact in a place where you have on one hand the mechanical engineer side in a way, and you have the designers on the other side, and in the middle that's where they meet, okay, in a way. And you have two worlds. And it is when you have diversity that you become extremely creative, and that's what you learn. They said basically everyone can innovate. I don't know if you saw the Pixar movie Ratatouille, right?
Of course.
Yes. So they said even rats can become chef. right? So that's what I say. So, in fact, anyone can be creative. Anyone can be its own CEO and build his own company. So maybe we had a conversation, I think, yesterday, and I was asking you. So now I'm controlling the interview, but I was curious to, and I was asking you if you want to learn about entrepreneurship. California is the right place to be because, again, people think that it's all about technology. It's not only about technology. It's about, as I say, it's the diversity that makes thing incredible, right? People coming from different backgrounds, and because you meet all of them, that's where you find the best ideas.
How dare do you ask me if I saw Ratatouille? Of course, I also went in Paris, in Disneyland, they have the full attraction. So this is...
I didn't know you were a fan of Ratatouille, but it was my case, I can tell you. And no, but I think it's a nice analogy, right? People always think, oh, I'm not an innovator. That's not true. Everyone is. The key thing is, I say, listening and build your point of view based on interaction, meeting interesting people, sometimes even not that interesting people.
And you like to qualify this school as spectacular and revolutionary.
Yes, because as I say, specifically when you have the engineering background, you always think about machines, computers, to create. Immediately say, okay, I'm going to build an application to fix the problem. But in fact, no. One thing that I learned, as I say, is that first you need to understand what is the problem you want to fix, right? Sometimes the problem is not at all the technology; is much more the human. Instead, sometimes it's because people do not have access to information. So as I say, this is what the school gives you, the idea and the opportunity to think differently. And since then, as I say, I believe I changed a little bit the way I think.
Right now we are in 2021, in 2021. What are your takes on the future of technology? Because you've been there since a long time, since the 80s. So you've been observing a lot.
Yeah. So another thing that I discovered is the human experience, right? And this also that I learned a lot, specifically when I was at the railway company, is that you can introduce, as I say, a lot of technology, but you need to think about the change management. People sometimes are afraid about technology, even though it will make their life easier. So there is that dimension to also understand fears, etc. So before you implement technology, you need to spend time with the people that will have to use it, and their feedback is extremely important. And from that perspective, the UX is the future. And UX stands for human experience, of course. And UI also, user interaction. It's much more important than the technology, I can tell you. And the example is, you see the iPhone is very simple. You don't need to have a PhD in quantum mechanics to know how it works. It's intuitive. And that is first about the experience. That's nothing to do with technology. So that the experience, the user experience, is fundamental for any success.
So Miguel, you took all this knowledge and resources, you put it down in your luggage and back to Montreal with to apply it.
That's true. So when I came back at Montreal, I did a little bit. I tried to see a little bit let's say the innovation area centers in Montreal, and I discovered, to my big surprise, there were multiple ones. There's the District 3 from Concordia. You have the Nutman House. You have, in a way, the Dobson Center at McGill. And there also we learn a lot about creativity. So even though you come with your background of California, you can still learn a lot because there were interesting things. If I take the example of the Adoption Center, there was the 3H, the hacker, the hustler, and the hipster. And that's what it takes to build a new company. You need the artist, you need the tech guy, and you need the marketing guy. And the combination of the three talents make also ideas successful.
I was mentioning the visible part of cities, but you just mentioned, for example, the underground, because have you ever heard of the Boring Company, who is creating tunnels?
Yes, yes, these are the fast speed trains, yes, and this is Elon Musk, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, so this person, Elon Musk, is unbelievable. He is a source of multiple ideas. But related to that, it's interesting you bringing that, because when you think Elon Musk, okay, you think about Tesla, you think about also the SpaceX. But if we before SpaceX, of course, it was Tesla, right? And you say, okay, so so Tesla is a car company. No, Tesla is not a car company. What you discover is that Tesla is a battery company, which first application is the car. But if you look a little bit, they sell batteries for houses, and they also were reselling basically the battery to other car players, right?
Of course, because Tesla is linked with another company called Solar City.
Yeah, exactly. So their strength is mainly is the battery, right? And that's where you think about it, but if the core business is battery, then the more batteries you sell through different kind of vertical, the better, right? Same thing, different form, but still batteries.
That's fascinating, because through this last decade, you've seen kind of the switch between the oil to electric. Even through electric is very new.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Because if we talk about the smart cars, right? So when we were in California, Google were starting to deploy those smart driverless cars, right? Of course, there was a human there. And they told me that in the beginning it's very exciting to see the car moving, but in the end it's getting boring, right? So I believe they will have to reinvent the car inside, maybe more like nice sofas where you can discuss, drink. But the interesting part was that at the time they were also talking about Uber. Being very interested by those driverless car and the idea. So not only they changed the taxi industry, right? But for them, the vision was also that at the end there will be not even a taxi driver, right? Remember, so Uber in the beginning was not a taxi company; it was a platform to facilitate taxi driver to meet their customers, right? So that's really the core business. And then, as you could see, sometimes you have adaptations to other countries. So if I refer to, in France, I think it's BlaBlaCar, right? And so I would call it a spin-off in a way of Uber, because I think the founder of BlaBlaCar said, okay, it's nice to facilitate people to, let's say, to get a taxi, right? But BlaBlaCar, as you know, they ask more questions. So, do you want the driver to talk or not? Or does the taxi driver want the passenger to talk or not?
Sure.
And so you understand. So then at the end you mix technology and also human, which is interesting. So, but it's yet another step beyond this idea. So this is what is fascinating, right? And what you learn is that change will always happen. So it's not it's futile to resist. Instead, it's to think and say, okay, if this is possible, what does that mean, in fact, for me? How will I take advantage or not? But resist, it's going to happen. So the question is not if it's going to happen, is when. And what are you going to do?
Because in the span of history, changes have always been brutal.
True. So every revolution, if you noticed, is due always, in fact, by the introduction of a new technology, right? So the Industrial Revolution, you had the train, right? That happened. Then the revolution that happened was the car. and the petroleum, basically. And now I think we are more in the IT world, so the computers, which are the drivers for the new transformation of the society. Things are much more smarter. And then the question is more how you get your privacy. Privacy will become a key service in the end.
Privacy and artificial intelligence.
Yes, absolutely. So again, right? So I'm not an expert at all in artificial intelligence. So I will be very cautious. But what we should see soon is a big transformation of the industry, all the industries, due to the introduction of computers. If you look a little bit, cars are plenty of now computers that are telling you roughly what's happening in the car, what is the problem, right? You see the introduction of robots in the manufacturing plants. You see computers everywhere. You see tablets everywhere. And this is this is a little bit the transformation that is happening. And yes, so what will this world will look like in 5-10 years? I don't know. Smarter, yes. But with all changes, there's always the positive things. And there's the negative thing. We will have to see what's going to happen there.
Miguel Cobo, thank you so much for your time. It was really interesting.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.